So, guys, I want to talk about AEW Dynamite tonight, and I do want to say that honestly, that this was a very, very strong show. I give it an A plus because usually when they have a show after a pay per view, they don't really do a good job. And I know, like I've talked about when I went to New Jersey and I went to World's End at Nassau Coliseum, and they had a show the night after it. Then they had like a Dynamite show that Wednesday at the Prudential Center. Like that show was awful, god awful, really. So I definitely really really appreciate that this show. They really did a great job of setting up different storylines, and you don't know where one thing's going to go and another thing's going to go. And then also just understanding that this is Wembley Stadium season. This is their WrestleMania season. They ultimately have to the ultimately either have to sell out or do just as good. Like honestly, they need to sell at least over 70,000 tickets. If they don't hit last year's number, no problem. But they have to sell at least 70,000 tickets for it not to be anything less than embarrassing. So they're definitely in the mode of just really caring about their shows and understanding that this is either nut up or shut up time, because and Tony Khan and his family can't be putting money in AEW forever. Definitely, if he has a $100 million roster, they have to show that they're worth that, or or else he's just gonna invest in another company or whatever. I'm gonna start it with the end of the show. That there was Ospreay versus Daniel Garcia, and post match, what happens is that the match ends with interference. So what happens is that Daniel Garcia gets the ring from MJF, and then he decides not to use it on Will Ospreay. So I was a little annoyed with this because obviously that's how you ended Swerve and Ospreay, and then because Don Callis introduced a screwdriver and Ospreay didn't use it. So you're seeing that thing too. That same thing, distraction with a foreign object, done by a heel, and then the person who gets it chooses not to turn heel. So you repeated that, so that's a little annoying. And then post match, you saw a beat down by MGF to Daniel Garcia. So there's a couple of things about it. Like, it was definitely very brutal. It was very bloody. You obviously see, MGF trying to be Roddy Piper, and he's throwing trash on some of the audience members, and he's getting in the face of a fan, and I think he tries to take somebody's phone or something like that, but he just knows how to kind of just, rough up the audience a little bit, because honestly, that's still a very, very controversial tactic, because obviously a person can say it's too far, or when do you draw the line between, MJF and New Jack? When does it when do you cross that line, really? And then the other thing too is that like, you have to point it out, he was getting in the face of a black fan, and the black fan was getting in his face, really. So he was engaging with people of different races, because if you kind of have something where he throws a drink on a black kid and it seems like he always picks on black people, that's going to stand out, really. I'm mixed race, and actually, if you want to know something that happened to me, when he was in Connecticut, they offered me pizza, but then MJF pulled the pizza box away. So again, if he's actually targeting, people that look African American or African American people, just that, that's a very, very bad look for him. So I like how he's kind of engaging with other people with it, so it doesn't look like he's just messing with one race, because it's about it just doesn't look good, really. So I like how he's engaging with women, and he's engaging with fans of different races. I think he was engaging with some white fans and some black fans, so it didn't feel like he was just targeting a certain race or a certain gender, really. So I appreciate that. But we all know this about MJF, really. He knows how to kind of cross lines. He knows how to be charismatic. He's really trying to set up him versus Daniel Garcia. And then, honestly, this could also set up Will Ospreay versus MJF down the line, really, because that would be a great match. Or even if you feel like Daniel Garcia doesn't have it yet, Ospreay versus MJF will be a match at Wembley Stadium, and it would be one of the matches to have, really. You can do Hangman Swerve or Bryan Danielson Swerve, but I think that Hangman Swerve works, and then Bryan Danielson Swerve at their Washington show because they're both Washington boys. Like that would be the way to go. So it definitely kind of makes you wonder where they're going to go with this. But I definitely feel Danny Garcia became a star tonight. So it was a really great ending to the show, and definitely there's a lot of other things in the show that worked very well. So the first match on the card was Bryan Danielson versus Pac, and I just remembered that Swerve Strickland was not on the show tonight. So definitely, again, he's in that role of, being the champion that's not featured. And like I mentioned before, he did say with the interview with Mark Henry that he wants to be like kind of unpredictable, really. So definitely, if that's how he wants to do things, just as long as he's getting like a long title reign, then it does feel like it's worth something. But I do feel that next week he has to open the show or end the show. There really has to be, just featuring him a lot better, really. Especially going to Wembley Stadium season. You don't want to treat him like CM Punk when The Rock and John Cena were having a match. So between like Pac and Bryan Danielson, I kind of wish there was more like high flyer moves between them. There was some like there was a lot of back and forth really. Bryan Danielson hit some like kicks. He also hit he did this really cool move like on the ring apron, and then Pac also hit like the red arrow, and they exchanged like suplexes and submissions. And it was a really awesome, like, back and forth, really. I did wish there was a little bit more, like, high flyer moves. Pac did the spot where he jumped off the barricade, and then he hit Bryan Danielson with an elbow. Then he also jumped off the top rope and hit Bryan Danielson with an elbow. And, they also exchanged a bunch of submissions. And it was a really good match, really, So ultimately, it was a great start to the show, but I honestly felt bad that they didn't put the attention on Swerve really because as I said, like he's the champion. That should be that should be emphasized. The next thing that they announced on the show is that during the Blood and Guts match, Mark Briscoe is going to be in there, and then also I'm really excited for this because you saw how crazy he got during the ladder match on the Forbidden Door show. So I can imagine like him like doing like a cannonball through the cage and just destroying shit, or even jumping off the cage. Like Mark Briscoe is a crazy bastard, really. So this is gonna be a lot of fun. And what happens, and I'm very proud that you have him on the microphone this time because we all know like with Mark Briscoe, he can talk on the microphone. He does have like a very interesting dialogue, really. So a very colorful dialogue. So you obviously have to really feature a guy like this. So with that, I will say this: that Jack Perry comes out, hits Mark Briscoe, and then Kyle O'Reilly comes out, and then he defends Mark Briscoe. And then what happens is that the Elite come out with Okada, and then the Acclaimed come out. So it would be really interesting if you did something like Kyle O'Reilly, Mark Briscoe, and the Acclaimed, and then you have another person. Like, is Billy Gunn going to be in this one, or is he not going to be in this one? Because you automatically have your five people if it's Daddy Ass, Max Caster, Anthony Bowens, Kyle O'Reilly, and Mark Briscoe versus like the EVPs. I do think that Adam Page is going to be in that, but yeah, I'll be really happy if the Acclaimed are going to be in the Blood and Guts. I really think that's going to happen, but you don't know for it yet. But I really want the Acclaimed to be in this one because they do have a lot of charisma. It's going to be something really excellent if they are in that because they know how to hype up the crowd, really. And I'm actually planning on going down to Blood and Guts and being in there and watching that in person, really. So definitely really exciting. And then also, too, I do like what they mentioned, which is that they're not going to reveal all the participants, even though you kind of know where it's going, just because you got to create some suspense. And then also another thing that they did during the show was that they had the Mercedes-Benz QR code. And then they also have the QR code for All Out. And they did that for two reasons, because obviously they're in Chicago, so the people in the audience can get a QR code to get some good seats, and then also, too, for people who are watching in the Chicago area, they can get some good seats as well, really. So definitely, I like how AEW is doing this. They're not doing the Vince McMahon thing of just being like, okay, well, we're watching sweepstakes. Tony Khan's gonna give $1 million a show to a fan. They're actually doing stuff like if you want to get some good deals, get some good seats, um, maybe pay some money if you have it, or get a decent seat. For like usually with AEW, you get some good seats for like $200 to $400, which is really good. But some of the ringside seats are usually around like $2,000, and that's really a steal because this was WWE. Ringside could be like over $10,000, and other seats like even a good seat would be like a few like $800 to $1,000. But if it's WrestleMania, it's like $2,000 $3,000 for a decent seat. So I do think that you know so I do like that like they're doing QR codes during the show really because it makes you want to stay and watch the show, or you never know what to expect really. So it's a way to draw the audience. So I really appreciate that, but also that it's not them doing a sweepstakes or something like that, because obviously AEW has to be about making money and being a business. So this is a good way to reward people who actually watch the show, really. And then the next thing that I do have to say is that I really appreciate them actually just giving you some hints of who could be in the Blood and Guts match. So definitely it could be Kyle O'Reilly, Billy Gunn, Max Caster, Anthony Bowens, and Mark Briscoe. But I wouldn't want to see I would want to see somebody else outside of outside of Kyle O'Reilly. But the other thing that I also want to say too, that this is also good because it could set up Kyle O'Reilly versus Jack Perry at Wembley Stadium, because Kyle O'Reilly just lost the title, and then also they could also kind of set up either Kyle O'Reilly versus Mark Briscoe at Death Before Dishonor, or Jack Perry versus Mark Briscoe at Death Before Dishonor, which I think is what they need to do. It's either that or Christian Cage versus Mark Briscoe at Death Before Dishonor, just because you really need to just put him against a really good heel, or Takeshita, really. So if you this is how to get Jack Perry versus Mark Briscoe, or the EPs get mad and then they say you're gonna face Christian Cage at Death Before Dishonor, these are good ways to kind of set up those shows, really. So like use this to tell a story so you can set up other matches. So this was a really good segment, and it definitely is going to lead to good things. So the next match on the card was Will Nightingale versus Chris Statlander, and I do want to talk about this a lot. That definitely one thing I really appreciate about this match is that it started with them brawling on the ramp, and then Will Nightingale throwing Chris Statlander down the ramp. And I like this because obviously this all made sense, really. Chris Statlander is very pissed off. No, Will Nightingale is pissed off with Chris Statlander. This would make sense, really. This is not just like, AEW is going to do a bunch of hardcore spots or whatever, or they're going to fight outside the ring for no purpose. They don't like each other. This makes sense, really. This is not just we're going to do a last man standing match in a we're gonna do a last man standing match in the middle of a regular match type of thing. I'm happy that they didn't do that. So I'm really okay. So I'm happy with this. And Will Nightingale dominated this match. He was doing a lot of really great spots. He does like a cannonball, senton, a couple of suplexes and other moves off like the top rope or the second rope. And as I said this year, like she's really honestly, I would say the female MVP and the female rookie of the year. Like she went from like nobody really knowing her to actually really standing out. And I actually really hope that she wins this tournament. And this would be really good to reward her for all the hard work she's doing. Because I do think that if you have her lose and do Chris Statlander versus Will Nightingale at Wembley Stadium, that would be a bad match because they've already feuded. So it's almost like saying same old shit. The next thing that happened in the middle of the match was Chris Statlander gets a chain from Stokely Hathaway. And what happens was that I'm not sure. I don't remember the sequence, but I think what happens is that she tries to use it, and then it gets botched. And then what happens is that Will Nightingale actually hits a finisher and beats Chris Statlander. So now Stokely just introduced a weapon, it backfired. MJF introduced a weapon, it backfired. Don Callis introduced a weapon and it backfired. So 3 times in less than a week is way too many times. Like, this cannot be done for at least 3 months, really, not until like World's End or something like that, because honestly that's very, very repetitive bullshit, really. The next thing that I did not like is that Will Nightingale takes a pile driver from Chris Statlander. So I felt like once again you're kind of seeing her putting that move a little too much. We all know that she's flexible and other things like that, but it seems like as I said, you're making this very big, powerful woman that has some bulk on her, be easily lifted by smaller people. And Chris Statlander, she's known for being muscular, she's kind of very slender, really. And it was cool because I remember like Chris Statlander trying to attempt like an F5 on Will Nightingale. But this was a great back and forward. Definitely Will Nightingale dominated the match, and it made sense because obviously she's mad with Chris Statlander, and winning the tournament means a lot. And she's never been AEW Women's Champion, and she definitely, I think, would be the next person to become the AEW Women's Champion, unless you want to do something with Mariah May. But I think the problem is that you have to get the title off of Toni Storm. She's done it for way too long. And you can't have Mariah May do it because she's trying to be like Toni Storm's twin, and they're doing the lesbian angle. Like, she's a little too much like a wannabe Toni Storm. So there has to be a sense of giving to somebody different. And I think Will Nightingale definitely has that. So I think that to change everything, really, you need to get Will Nightingale needs to hold that title, and she's the right person for that. I think that'd make another video to talk about. But I'm happy Will Nightingale won. It made sense, really, and then also I really hope this doesn't lead to Chris Statlander versus Will Nightingale part 3 or 4, really, because that would just be like you don't want Wembley Stadium to be a bunch of repeat matches. Toni Storm versus Will Nightingale. That to me sounds like a match that everybody would want to see. The next thing that happened on the card was Chris Statlander, and she came out and she was like talking about like what happened to her, and then she had something very similar to a stroke. And it's great that she took time off, really, because she was like saying that part of her body became numb. So obviously, a stroke, that could be like a paralysis or something not working on one side of the body, really. So it was good that she caught that. And honestly, I'm very proud of her for doing that. The next thing is that she said something like, if you're going through hell, feel it, and that's going to make you feel so happy once it's over. And what that means is that sometimes when we're going through a bad time, some people just don't acknowledge it, they don't express it, they don't kind of be like, okay, well, I've been through this, I know how it feels, I know how it hurts, and I got out of it, so I persevered. And I can say that as somebody who's dealt with depression, poverty, racism, just working like lots and lots of hours to afford all my trips so I can travel and achieve my goal, visiting every state, really, So definitely what you said was very inspiring. And it's good because obviously when Mercedes Moné comes out, you're kind of seeing, the match and the heel and the babyface dynamic. It was really good because Mercedes Moné comes in, and then you're actually seeing her be greeted by the Young Bucks. And this works very well because what they're doing is that they know that she got booed. That's part of the controversy around her right now. And they're like, okay, instead of just, we're going to do the John Cena thing, we're going to ignore the boos and make her a babyface and kind of ride that. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. We're actually going to, pardon me, guys. They're actually going to like just make her a heel, and they're going to even have like the Young Bucks introduce her and everything like that, really, So definitely it was good that Mercedes Moné wasn't respectful, and they did something where they got the balloons and everything around her. So while Britt Baker was talking, so it kind of really felt like, the Young Bucks were telling the staff and everybody to disrespect Mercedes Moné, disrespect Britt Baker for Mercedes Moné, really. So I kind of appreciate that because, that definitely works. and it may have felt a little silly or campy, but it definitely works. Like she's getting like the movie star treatment, and definitely Britt Baker and other people know that. So honestly, Mercedes Moné works as a heel. Definitely use that the same way Chris Jericho is using that. So a lot of great stuff. So the next thing that happens on the show is that Will Ospreay talks to Don Callis, and he talks about wanting to be out of the Don Callis family, and then Don Callis actually accepts his resignation. But then when they hug each other, Don Callis looks at the camera really, and he kind of has his eyes are kind of wide, and there's some frustration in his eyeballs. So it definitely tells you that this is not over until he says it over. And I think that what they're going to do is they're going to have maybe Will Ospreay run a gauntlet against all the Don Callis members. And then again, at the end of the show, Will Ospreay is pissed off with MJF, really. So there could be something with Will Ospreay that he has 4 or 5 people that he's going after. And I kind of like this foreshadowing because it kind of gives you ideas about where things are going to go. But it also kind of says, okay, well, Ospreay versus Hobbs, Ospreay versus Takeshita Part 2, Ospreay versus Kyle O'Reilly, Kyle Fletcher, Ospreay versus, Trent Beretta and other people in the faction, really. So there's definitely, 4 or 5 people that you're teasing. It's one person that could have 4 or 5 different feuds, and I kind of like this because obviously, it kind of makes you wonder where things are going to go, and then you don't know where it's going to go because then you're like, okay, it can go in 5 or 6 different directions, really. But ultimately, they have to kind of figure out a way to make sure all those directions pay off, So I'm really happy with this and what it can represent. The next match was I'm gonna call it Team Joe. Yeah, Team Joe versus the Gates of the Cage of Agony, and honestly, I call them. I like to call them Brian Cage weekly jobber moment or Brian Cage jobs weekly because we all know that in these matches, what happens to Brian Cage? He always jobs, and they had this match, and they had the match, and there was a bunch of submissions. I believe it was Khan hits a really cool I think gut wrencher move. I'm really happy to see that. But the problem is you know how Brian Cage matches go. That he's basically a big powerhouse wrestler. He looks way bigger than Hook and Shibata, and everybody on his team looks bigger than Hook and Shibata, and they lose all the time. Really, they're honestly the Team Rocket of AEW. So. And it's like what people say about Brian Cage. You've seen him lose to Tessa Blanchard. He jobs way too much, and I think that it might be for a weekly check, really. But the thing is that you really need to just give him a strong run and give these two guys on the Cage of Agony or the Gates of Agony or whatever they're called a strong run in AEW, really, because they're not going to matter. Or they're not going to be as formidable if they always lose, really. You actually tell a better story if they actually lose or if you had Chris Jericho interfere. So that way, the 6 of them are under Chris Jericho, or they get a win. Or what happens is that maybe they actually win, and then Chris Jericho is shaking Hook's hand. And says, Hook, you look a little dizzy, but you know what? I'm not going to take advantage of you. And then Chris Jericho does that. And then there was a beatdown. There are 2 beatdowns on Hook, and they put him through a table. And then backstage, Jericho puts fire in his face, really. So, it's a little weird because you did that. He did that with Daniel Garcia at the end. So there's definitely some, clicheing or repetition a lot. And I think that's the weakness of the show. That even though I would say that I really appreciate them for doing a post pay-per-view show very well, and also being okay, you know what, these wrestlers care about being here. They don't care about just saying oh well, I don't want to work and I just want to cook a big barbecue or whatever. They're actually working the day before 4th of July, and they're actually just putting on a good show for everybody in Chicago. So I really appreciate the effort that they're doing tonight, but I did feel that they kind of repeated a bunch of things. They repeated foreign object interference, and they also repeated a rookie babyface getting beaten down severely. You did that with Hook, and then you did it with Daniel Garcia. So it's definitely a little bit of a down point on the show. And the next match was Jeff Jarrett versus Hangman Adam Page as the mystery person. So a lot of people kind of knew that this was going to happen. I was saying to myself, what would have happened if you actually had a member of the Don Callis family? If you had a member of the Don Callis family, just to show that they're in alignment with each other. What would happen if you had Claudio Castagnoli and he's like, I'm out of the faction, really. I'm out of the Blackpool Combat Club because I'm sick of Bryan Danielson, because he and Bryan Danielson were having a bit of an argument. What would have happened if you actually had Luchasaurus or Christian Cage or somebody else really like that? There could have been a bunch of interesting or surprise directions, but it's very predictable that you had Adam Page. And then you had the match, and you had it with Jeff Jarrett. So in the beginning, it kind of came off like Jeff Jarrett was the babyface, and I kind of was a little taken out of this match because I was like, how is Jeff Jarrett the babyface in this? Like, we all know Adam Page is intense. He's a heel. He's a friend of the Young Bucks. So it did kind of make Jeff Jarrett look like the babyface when he's also a heel in AEW. So that wasn't a good dynamic. They should have had Dustin Rhodes, or they should have really had Dustin Rhodes in this role, not Jeff Jarrett. And I don't want to hear the Owen Hart crap. Jeff Jarrett is a heel, so he needs to be wrestling a babyface. If you're going to have a heel actually be involved in this match and be a heel like Adam Page was doing by being, unapologetically brutal, you need to have that go up against a babyface. So I honestly felt that this wasn't appropriate for Jeff Jarrett unless you turned him babyface beforehand, which was what they should have done if they wanted this as an end result, really. But it was a good match. You see Jeff Jarrett doing the figure four, trying to be Ric Flair and Owen Hart, and then you kind of see, Karen cry over him, and they go for a while, really. And there's a lot of just you think it's going to end quickly, but Jeff Jarrett puts in more of a fight, and Adam Page puts in more of a fight, and they keep on going. So I expect this match to be short, but they actually showed that she really made Jeff Jarrett look like, if you want to fight this old man, this old man has a lot to give, really. This is not going to be an easy victory. So I appreciate them letting Jeff Jarrett look strong, but that's usually how Jeff Jarrett matches go. He makes himself look strong, really. But there's a huge swerve chant and cowboy shit chant in the audience. So I'm a little worried with this because honestly they can do Adam Page versus Swerve, part 3 or 4, and I would be upset with this because it's disrespectful. Because it's just like what happened with MJF and Adam Cole. They had a match in Washington D.C. and then they had a match at Wembley Stadium. You don't do that where you have 2 matches like that, especially when it's going to be a pay-per-view match. That's just, and especially for your show of shows, we're going to give it away for free on Dynamite. Why would I want to watch it again? Or if you had to add pay-per-views and other things like that, why would I want to watch it again, really? So I'm not happy that you're having Adam Page in this, because I think that they're going to say, okay, Adam Page versus Swerve is what they need to do. And I think they're going to do that. But I think Bryan Danielson versus Swerve would be the best match. But that makes more sense for their Washington / Tacoma show in a couple months, really. So it's really interesting to see what they're going to do. But I also fear that if you do Swerve versus Adam Page, they really hate each other. They have a really violent feud. This kind of makes sense for them to have a hardcore match. And that's a little controversial to have that as your main event of Wembley Stadium. I understand Double or Nothing, you have Anarchy in the Arena, but you don't want to. But as some people say, that it may look very like GCW or something like that. Really, if you have Adam Page versus Swerve at Wembley Stadium, he wins the Owen Hart tournament, Adam Page, and then they decide to have a hardcore bloody match and everything like that. Or what would happen if you want to have that match? You don't feel that's a good main event, and then you decide to end it with MJF versus Ospreay or something like that. So then it feels like, okay, not only are you having a hardcore match with your champion, and some people may say it's a little like overdone or it's not to the liking of Jim Cornette. You're also going to say that it's that maybe a little like too edgy to be a main event, and then you also put Swerve not in the main event in Wembley Stadium. So those things could happen if you have Adam Page win, where you have the match stipulation. You have to have a match stipulation that works. Another hardcore match could work, and then also on top of that, you will have a situation where if they choose to go in that direction and they have the hardcore match and they feel that's appropriate, it may not even main event Wembley Stadium. You may have like Ospreay again, and that would be bad because then you're saying, even though Swerve's the champion and Ospreay says, Swerve should be champion right now, he's put in situations that hinders his success really. So that's that. And then the last match was Danny Garcia and Will Ospreay. So, a really great back and forth. When you work with Will Ospreay, you really have to pick up the pace and everything like that. So I really appreciate all the stuff that Dan Garcia was doing. He did a pile driver on Will Ospreay. He endured the style clash. He got out of a lot of moves really. Like he really transitioned from being just another wrestler to a main event wrestler. Like definitely almost like maybe AJ Styles in TNA wrestling where the first couple matches he was in, you knew that there was some potential in him, and then he had a couple more bigger matches or bigger spots, really. Then you knew that okay, this is not just another guy, really. This is somebody who could be a big deal. So I think that Danny Garcia, Tony was right. There's something very great about him, and he really needs an opportunity to really shine, really. So I really think that you need to get to MJF versus Danny Garcia. That's going to be a hell of a match, really. At least MJF is going to put in the emotions and the story, and Danny Garcia is going to reciprocate that. So, it was definitely a really excellent show. There's a lot of really great directions, great wrestling, and I'm happy with everything that I'm seeing. I think AEW really cares about, being a big deal show, and definitely they're putting in the work to accomplish that. Legitimately, I regret going to Puerto Rico the past couple of days. I actually wish I'm in Chicago watching all this, being the group live, really. So I'll just know for future reference, whenever they have a show, I'm definitely going to be there because it seems like they're putting in the effort to say that being there is going to be worth it.